the formula that we teach, the formula is really about brain coherence and heart coherence. And when you're living driven by the hormones of stress and you're living in survival, and the rush of those chemicals causes, the arousal begins to cause you to feel more in your body, more like a body, more attention on your outer environment. That's where the danger is. And preoccupied with time. The arousal of those chemicals causes a person then to try to control and predict everything in their lives. Because they're experiencing a loss of control. They're experiencing the inability to predict the next moment. They have the perception that something's getting worse. And people spend 70% of the time living this way. And now they're shifting their attention to the one person, to the one problem, to the one place the problem exists, then back to work, and then to their boss, and to their coworkers, and then to their children, and to the appointments. And every single one of those elements is already neurologically in their brain. There are neurological networks for every person, every object, everything, every place in their life. So then, as they shift their attention from one neurological network to the other, their brain begins to fire very incoherently. And the brain moves into an alert state called high beta brainwave patterns. And people get stuck in that state. And they overanalyze everything in their lives. And they drive their brain further and further into higher states of high beta. So then they're always preoccupied with what's going to happen in the next moment. And the majority of the time, they're thinking about the worst thing that could happen. And when you live in that state, you're combining a thought of the worst thing with the feeling of fear or anxiety. And here goes the conditioning process again. And so now the body's becoming conditioned to live off that rush of adrenaline. And the mind is stimulating the very circuits and chemicals to produce more of those emotions. And living in survival is living in stress. And it's not a time to eat. It's not a time to digest. It's not a time for long-term building projects. It's not a time to learn. It's not a time to open your heart. It's time to run, fight, or hide. And people live the majority of their lives this way. And their brain begins to fire very disorderly. And the stronger the emotion the person feels from whatever stressor is causing it in their environment, the more they narrow their focus on the cause. And they habituate into this type of focus called a narrow focus. Focusing on objects, focusing on the material world, because the hormones of stress heighten the senses to cause us to become materialists. We don't see it, we don't smell it, we don't hear it, we don't taste it. We don't feel it, it doesn't exist. So we become materialists. We can't dream in that moment. It's more important to narrow your focus on matter, on the material world. And people get fixated and over-focused. And we found out that if you take a person and teach them how to do the exact opposite of that, instead of narrowing their focus this way and focusing on the material world, to broaden their focus and to focus on nothing. Take their attention off of everything material, off their body, off the people in their lives, off the objects, their cell phones, computers, their cars. Take their attention off the place they sleep, the place they work, the place they live, the place they're sitting, and take their attention off the predictable future and the familiar past. And broaden their focus and just keep opening their awareness to nothing. That all of a sudden, brain waves begin to slow down, because when they're sensing, they're not analyzing, they're not thinking. And the act of sensing begins to suppress the neocortex and starts to move into an alpha brainwave pattern. And then, if you do that properly, you can open your focus and keep it open. All of a sudden, those different parts of the brain that were fighting against each other start to synchronize. They start unifying. They start functioning in larger communities. And what syncs in the brain starts to link in the brain, and all of a sudden the brain starts firing in a more holistic state. And when your brain is incoherent, you're incoherent. And when your brain isn't working right, you're not working right. But all of a sudden now, they're beginning to connect to an invisible field of energy and information called the quantum field. And its signature, energetically, is greater and greater degrees of order, greater degrees of wholeness or oneness, less separation. And if you can teach a person how to connect to that field, they can't experience it with their senses. They understand that they experience this reality with their senses. They could only experience it as an awareness. When the person can get beyond their identity, without a name or a lifestyle or an ethnicity or a diet or a profession, just could linger there as an awareness, that the longer they do that, the more they keep their attention on that field and less on matter, their biology begins to become more whole, becomes more orderly. And all of a sudden, they're connected to something greater. And the brain begins to synchronize. And when you see those two hemispheres coming together, you see a huge change in the person's heart. The union of polarities, the union of dualities, the union of opposites is called wholeness, it's called love, it's called oneness. And all of a sudden energy moves right into the heart. And now, all that energy that was going from the brain and the heart into the lower centers of the body when the person was living in stress, all of a sudden, energy starts moving up into the heart. And once it makes it to the heart, the research shows over and over again, it goes right up to the brain. And now the brain, the heart is amplifying the brain. And so then, by teaching people how to create brain coherence, we've seen people move into heart coherence. We have spent many hours teaching our students, along with partnering with the Heart Math Institute, how to sustain heart coherence and to open their hearts. And not just for 5 minutes, not just for 10 minutes, not just for 15 minutes. We want them to be able to sustain it for 45 minutes or more. That they know how to do it. That they can create an elevated emotion on command. Because it is that emotion that connects them to a new future. Not the emotions that are created from the hormones of stress. They keep us connected to the past. So why not then practice that? So I want to practice that with you. And then I want to give you the opportunity to find the sweet spot of the generous present moment. And when you disconnect from everything material and you move into that present moment, that is the unknown. Most people wake up in the morning and the first thing they do is they start thinking about their problems. And those problems are just memories that are etched in their brain that are connected to certain people and objects and certain things and certain times and places. They're remembering the past. And if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, that person's thinking in the past. They're framing reality in the past. And every one of those problems has an emotion associated with them. And the moment the person feels unhappy, the moment the person feels unworthy, the moment the person starts to suffer, now their body's in the past. And how you think and how you feel creates your state of being. So most people wake up with their entire state of being already in the past. And once again, it just takes a thought, an image, or a memory, and a feeling, a stimulus and a response. You're conditioning the body into the past. And that's the known. And every single day, people wake up and do that. And if they can't think greater than those feelings, and those feelings by definition are chemical records from the past, then they're thinking in the past, and their brain and body are in the past. They're headed now into a predictable future, because they'll want to predict the same experience in the future that has the same feelings and emotions, and that's the known too. And they wake up and they run through a series of routine automatic behaviors that they've been doing for years on end. And it's their body that is dragging them into a predictable future based on what they did in the past. And they've lost their free will to a program. But there's no unseen hand that's dragging that person into the future. They've programmed their body to become that mind. They've done it so many times that the body now knows how to do it better than the conscious mind, and it's the body now. It's in that predictable future based on what they did in the past. And that's the known. So there's only one place where the unknown exists, and that is the present moment.